Hi, welcome to the Connection Podcast. I am Lauren Dry, also known as the Connection Catalyst. Connection and this podcast for me is personal. As a driven professional, I found myself an expert in all things work and business, but it was at home that I really needed clarity and ease. After finally finding that one marriage breakdown and one marriage reset later, and finally discovering what really works to have connection in modern relationships using science, simplicity, and soul, our signature program, Rise into Regulation, was born. That's giving so many others in modern driven relationships back clarity and ease for good. On the podcast today, we are going to dive deep together on all things relationships, business, identity, and leadership. Clarity and ease is at the heart of it all, and we are so happy to be with you so that you can have what you need in connection, mind, body, and soul too. I would like to welcome to the podcast today, Jack Bohannan. Jack is a relationship coach with a focus on attachment theory and somatics who helps women release old patterns in their relationships and dating by having new experiences of relationships during sessions. Now, I found Jack on a journey when we were exploring some more angles around attachment theory. Now, we've covered attachment theory quite a bit in the podcast previously. We've recently recorded an episode about anxious attachment theory. But what stood out for me with Jack was not only his passion and his interest around attachment theory, but also his angle and his thoughts as a man and his experience as someone who spent 2 decades working on and trying to navigate the complexities of relationship with a previous partner, and now being in a season where he's helping women really uncover and unlock their own true selves outside of attachment theory and break some of those hidden patterns too. Jack really brings a new perspective and a new angle for women and men about what it means to break those attachment style patterns and also find a new experience, a new growth, a new understanding of what it means to connect and become free of labels in our own identity and in relationships. So I'd like to welcome Jack and allow Jack to speak into for us, not only from a men's perspective, but as an expert in supporting women in breaking these patterns. I'd like to allow Jack to speak into why attachment theory is so important to him and also what he has found so fascinating, deeply changing in his own life, but also for his clients as well. Welcome to the podcast, Jack.
Thank you for that kind introduction. That's it, exactly. I am indeed a relationship coach, and I focus on helping women re-experience in real time some of the critical aspects of relationship in terms of setting boundaries, receiving kind words, knowing exactly what you want. So there are things that we can do that build skills around those areas that also illuminate whatever trauma we're sitting on deep down, relational attachment trauma. These things matter so much to me because they affected me a lot. I was in a very sorry state entering into adulthood where, for reasons, I had a lot of trouble connecting with other people. And attachment theory describes how we do that. It describes the ways that we connect and the ways that we struggle to connect with ourselves and other people. So it resonates with me and it resonates with other folks because it describes how we are human together. We define ourselves, we define our personhood as a relational entity where we're bouncing things off the other people in our life, in childhood and then in adulthood. So our deep-seated patterns that we hold are represented by our attachment style. And I know that your listeners are pretty well versed in this. So if you want to go further into what that means and unpack some of the different attachment styles, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, we can just assume they're good and keep rolling.
Thank you so much, Jack. I am so excited to dive a little bit deeper into your experience, your personal experience, and your professional experience in this area, and really help women and men understand more about attachment theory, particularly from a men's angle, and how that can help women too. But I'm really excited to chat to you and go a little bit deeper around all things attachment style and the different styles themselves, because some people are really going to resonate with what anxious attachment style is. But anxious attachment style is part of a spectrum. And when it comes to relationships, when it comes to connection, understanding attachment style really means having an understanding of what that can look like in all its forms in relationships, in connection with other people. Because I don't know if other people are aware of this, but our attachment styles can flux and change through our life according to what season we are in. So I'd love to hear from you, first of all, why this work resonates with you so much and why you find attachment theory to be so powerful, to be so supportive, and so important to the clients that you work with as well.
Attachment is fundamental to being a person. So, as people, as humans, we form relationships, and that's how we form self to start out life. We form in relation to other people, and a lot of development happens between 0 and 18 months, or even before 0, in how we're co regulating with our parents or caregivers. And some of those early experiences that we have, we just carry them forward into life blind. So, all of this deep stuff about who we are and our personality is just on autopilot. And people learn about attachment theory, and it's like lights go on. They're like, oh, I'm getting it. My partner is this way, I'm that way. So it's become really popular lately, maybe in the last 2 years, of pop relationship theory. And it's not a new concept at all. It's something that developed in the 1950s in research of how children connect with their primary caregiver, usually their mother. And only recently has it become all the rage for some reason. My suspicions about why that is we're having to do relationship in a much more conscious way now because we don't necessarily need each other. After all these progressive reforms, women don't need men for financial sustenance. And we're just like floating around trying to figure out how we're going to connect. And this is a really important, powerful way to understand how we connect.
I love that. That's a really powerful kind of insight into attachment theory, how long it's been around, and why it's really resonating for people so much right now. And it really is. It's front and center for so many conversations. And I think it's really allowing people to unlock and gain almost a sense of clarity and simplicity again around some of the most common relationship patterns and dynamics that they find themselves in. It gives them a sense of reassurance around why some patterns and cycles repeat. So it's a great place to start if you're trying to unlock why things happen, why we choose the people that we do, to start with attachment theory. But I'd love to hear from you as well. Why does this work? Why specifically does attachment theory? Why does it resonate so much for you? How did you discover it? How do you
Yeah.
experience this in your personal life? What stands out for you around attachment theory and why it's such a big piece of your work?
Yeah. Yeah. I was a mess. I was a complete mess and very incapable of connecting with people. In my early 20s, I was a difficult guy to be in a relationship with because my attachment style was so disordered. And there are 3 types of insecure attachment, which we can go into. I have the most complex and baffling and difficult of the 3, in my opinion, or at least it's a mix of the other 2. So I think it's important to break that down quickly, but I am absolutely happy to share my personal experience, which we can we can frame later in terms of what like childhood was, sure, in generalities. But my formative experience was with one partner who I connected with very early in life and was with for 20 years. So we had a dramatic dance of attachment infused drama throughout that time where it was high tension, high trauma connection with this other person who happened to be a therapist who specialized in attachment theory. So she wrote on that in her master's, and she's a dear person. And yeah, so I have a deep understanding of that from being with someone who also had a disordered attachment style. And having navigated that myself at depth with this partner who was very self-aware, and we're both like doing therapy, we're doing the work, and it didn't really help. It didn't satisfy my need to have the power to do something different. So we can do a lot of therapy, and I did a lot of therapy. And at the same time, we can watch ourselves relive the same patterns, have the same
Mm,
behavior with all the self awareness in the world. And there you are acting the same way, doing the same thing. And in fact, therapy can really be a defense against having to change. So, yeah, it's interesting to have so much awareness and not be at the place that you want to be in terms of having the empowerment to do something different. So my
mm.
experience with her gave me a lot of insight, a lot of ability to communicate and sit with people at depth and in the drama and trauma that happens in relationship. I'm really thankful for that. And yeah, school of the hard knocks, PhD.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hear you with that. And I think so many of the listeners, me included, really resonate with doing a lot of work. I wrote that down as you were talking and put it in big capitals. Doing the work.
Mhm.
I think that there's something so unique and debilitating about being someone who can understand a lot, who has a capacity to learn, has a capacity to obtain a lot of information, but it just doesn't translate into
Yeah,
change. And I
good way.
hear how much care and respect that you have for your ex-partner. So I would really love to start off by asking you, what do you think was missing? What was that point in time where you came to this season of we've been together 20 years, we have all this knowledge, but it's not really closing the gap for us? And what do you feel like you learnt out of that season?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I think that there are some ways that I and everyone who experiences this disordered attachment objectify our partner. So,
Mm,
someone who's experiencing a lot of anxiety in their attachment style will grasp at their partner as though they are drowning. There's great urgency to have that person's attention and connection. And that's a form of objectification. When
right.
there's that much intensity, when it feels like an existential threat to be without
Mm,
your partner, that objectifies them as something that you have to control, that you have to manage. And on the flip side, it's true too. My fearful avoidant attachment style leans more avoidant. And a person who has that constitution will often feel overwhelmed by connection, and
mhm,
they will avoid their partner. They will turn away from connection. They will feel dysregulated by being close to someone. And it's the same thing on the flip side of the coin, that we have put our partner way over there. They are
mm,
not part of us. We are not in relationship with them. They are an object, and I need to stay the heck away from them. you know?
right.
So when we feel overwhelmed by connection, we're likely to put our partner at arm's length. And when we feel overwhelmed by being alone, we grasp at them in a way that's also objectifying. So I feel
Mm,
like the foundation for that connection was faulty. And in some
mhm,
ways, I knew it. I knew that there was some amount of personal development that needed to happen on my own as a
mhm,
single healthy adult, which I didn't have too much chance to be. And
mhm.
yeah, it's a little tragic, and life is tragic sometimes. So at some point, it made sense to separate. And
I really hear you with that one, and it's so tough. I think it's a really scary concept for a lot of people to consider. And I say that, and I know with a lot of irony as a marriage coach, the concept of, oh my goodness, I have to do so much development on my own and that we need to separate. Now, I want to kind of preface that with, if anyone's listening, if they're in a really tough season and maybe they're resonating with a lot of what you said there, Jack, which is so powerful around this is my programming and this is how I know to operate. And I'm only okay if this person is doing XYZ, or I have to move away when they are behaving badly. To even just touching the sides of, oh my goodness, do I need to do this work on my own, is terrifying. And it is a concept that blocks so many of us from even attempting to do the work, because what if that's the answer? What if the answer is that we can't do this together and I'm going to end up alone, especially after 20 years? It's a terrifying concept.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who, we hit that hard stage and we were separated, which is a scary thing to say, even now that we've repaired, reconnected, and my work is absolutely supporting you how to stay in your marriage. I think that the fear of being alone is something that blocks so many of us from even trying to do the work. Because what if I outgrow them? What if they outgrow me? What if by even taking a lens and looking at my patterns, what that's going to mean is this ends? Now, I'd love to explore that a little bit around the fear element. Now, as much as that's been a season and where that can go for a lot of relationships, I think that there's something so valuable and precious about what you said there around exploring development on your own. Now, for me in that season, what that looked like was, okay, stepping away from, I love the word that you used there about around objectifying your partner. I liked to think of myself as someone really independent, someone who didn't need another person. But I found I was swinging heavily when I finally touched to the sides of what anxious attachment was, who swung really heavily towards anxious attachment, because here I was thinking consciously, I'm just trying to be independent. I'm trying to sort our relationship out. What I was trying to do was fix my partner. And the
Sure.
more I tried to fix him, the more dysregulated I became, because I'd never realized that although there were things that my partner really needed to work on, the more I fixated on what he needed to do, the greater our disconnection becoming, but most importantly, our disconnection from self. So the
Yeah.
healing piece of the puzzle for me was not necessarily that the relationship had to end, but at what point was I going to start choosing, okay, how do I step outside of this dynamic? And for me, that was less, okay, you are the problem, and more,
Mm.
hey, I'm really sorry for my part in this, because I now am brave enough and ready enough to recognize that on an unconscious level, beginning to be a conscious level, I'm contributing to this. And
Yeah.
whether it's through the way I communicate, the way I show up, the dynamics, my willingness to step in the chaos with you, or the actual actions of what I was doing and saying as well, I think it's so important to hold space for the tenderness of that point in time where we go, oh, maybe, just maybe there's some development on my own that actually might help me here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So a lot of the obvious pathology can be in that partner who doesn't have the emotional wherewithal or the connection. Let's just call him the guy. In this example, we'll just gender him male. So far as his ability to communicate, his maturity, growth, I'm talking about myself here. So, in my situation, in my past, I definitely did have some developmental work to do. And my partner was game to do it with me. She was really proactive about that and jonesing for me to change. So, when somebody leaves the dishes sitting there, I like to use this analogy of like when somebody leaves the dishes sitting there, we're all going to do the dishes eventually. But if our roommate, if a partner rushes in and does those dishes for us, it's like they have a lower tolerance for the dishes being there. So
Mm.
we have our own timing on things. And when our partner pushes or rushes to get it there, it becomes their objective. It becomes about them more. So there's a way that the person who's pushing for their partner to grow actually undermines their agency and their ability to do so. And
Mhm.
kind of describes my situation a little bit. So, yeah, there's a lot of darkness that the person with anxious attachment can carry through the best of their intentions. They're the one that's usually more pro connection in one way, but that may be coming from a space where their partner is objectified, where the partner is a project to work on when they need attention and things from their partner. And then the dude is just out wandering around stray and nursing a cannabis addiction and generally trying to be 15. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity there. And I'm
Mhm.
assuming that your audience is familiar with these concepts of
Mm.
attachment theory and that we don't need to go into them and define them.
I would actually love to hear your interpretations and your definitions of attachment style. We tend to touch more on the anxious, avoidant, disorganized, secure, but I'd love to hear your how you speak into attachment styles. But I'd also love to, just on this angle, I want to pause first of all on something that you just said there. Someone with anxious attachment style who is in that season undermines their partner's agency to grow. That's huge. Because people with anxious attachment style often feel like I'm just helping. You know, if I say or do this, they're not going to join me on the journey. Or if I don't do XYZ, it's not going to get done. And I think so much of what happens underneath the surface there is that fear if I don't do it, no one will help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so pressing a pause and slowing down on that for a lot of people with anxious attachment style is a form of death to self. And there's an element of grief there. There's an element of being able to sit with your own fear and finding a new way to move into something that's more of a secure attachment style, which allows possibility to happen again. But I'd love to hear from you, not only just a brief summary of the different types of attachment style, also how do you think, or what's your observation on and your experience around how attachment styles show up maybe differently in men versus women, and maybe how are certain attachment styles judged or not understood as well as others?
Okay. Holy smokes. That's a lot. Yeah.
Go back and recap.
Yeah. Circle back. I love what you're pointing out about those with an anxious attachment style and wanting to do some amount of fixing the partner. It makes so much
Mm,
sense to do that. It comes from often a loving place, compassionate place, and it's so normal to do that. And then in another way, it's acting to get your needs met. It's coming from a selfish place in a different mode. So it's a really insidious thing that creeps up in a relationship. It's totally natural as a protective mechanism. Like, how can I engineer my partner's attention as though they're the parent who was once absent? How can I finally get that attention? So it's beautiful that your listeners are aware of that. And it makes a lot of sense to be in that mode. And there's a lot of benefit to coming out of it too. So,
mm,
one thing that I notice about clients who have anxious attachment, and most of my clients do, as we do some of this work together in session where I'm present with them, we're going through processes of setting boundaries, communicating really openly. We're focusing on what's happening right now in the moment in our bodies. We get to a place where things feel safe, and it often doesn't feel safe there. So,
mm,
despite all this desire to connect, this treadmill of trying to earn people's approval or connection, at the very core, there's something that doesn't want connection for a lot
mm,
of folks, a lot of people who have a worth wound sitting
mm,
down there in their belly. Why would you let somebody see that? Why would you actually want that deep connection? It's much
mm,
more likely that they'll choose a partner who doesn't have the capacity to give that to them. So that deep sense of unworthiness can stay hidden and stay safe. So
mm,
that's a little glimpse into anxious attachment as I observe it in my clients. And I'm happy to flip the lens around and look at myself. So you asked for a brief description of attachment style, and I'm getting pretty good at that because I go on podcasts and I talk about it a lot. um, but a person with an anxious attachment style is overwhelmed by feeling alone. They feel cut off, and they're more likely to be the partner who's doing the attempts at connection. A
Mhm.
person with avoidance attachment style, he feels overwhelmed by connection. They're more likely to withdraw. So
Mm.
those are the two primary types of insecure attachment.
Mhm.
There's a third type, disorganized or fearful avoidant, that is a little bit of mix of both. And then secure attachment is where we're okay being in connection and having people depend on us, depending on other people, also okay in solitude. So that's a
Mhm.
really brief recap. In
Mhm.
terms of the childhood conditions that give rise to those insecure attachment styles, the person who has an anxious attachment style most likely didn't receive consistent attention and love. They were wondering, where the heck is love going to come from? And deep, deep down inside them, they're wondering, like, hey, am I going to starve here because my parents are too maxed out? They're strapped for resources, they're inattentive. Whereas the person with avoidant attachment didn't receive the embrace, the warm, fuzzy love that we should have in childhood in terms of soothing comfort and attunement. So, as an infant, when they turned towards their caregiver for that type of connection, it wasn't there. And that part of their brain just shut down. It's like a nerve got burned away. So, they don't have that mode of operation in adulthood or don't have it in the same way that other people do. Fearful avoidance is a combination of both, and that person experienced a caregiver as a source of love and also a source of threat, or that the caregiver was dealing with their own trauma from their past. So, if there was a lot of fear in the caregiver, or if they were the cause of fear, a person is likely to develop fearful avoidance, which leaves us struggling for personhood at all in this
Mm.
constant state of dependence on other people and then also aversion to them. It's weird. And
Mm.
then we are able, as you said, to shift out of that to earn secure attachment. That
Mm.
you can do the work in therapy or in coaching or in other experiential settings to find yourself a new, healthy, happy human being. Or you can start out that way and be with a partner who is very dysregulated. And you may find yourself more anxious after a while. If you're wondering, what the heck are they going to do? When are they going to text? You can develop an anxious attachment style. Or
Mm.
likewise, if your partner is very reactive and demanding of you and leaning into you too much, you may find, oof, I'm having enough here. This is a lot of work to be in this relationship, and you may find yourself avoiding it. So those
Mm.
things are more fluid and flexible. And you asked about men, and you asked
Mm.
about misconceptions about attachment styles. So some of the literature out there really demonizes people with avoidant attachment. And I get it. I
Okay.
get where that's coming from because they do seem shut down and uncaring and ready to dismiss a partnership for very little reason. And in fact, they're struggling a lot inside. There's a lot of fear and shame happening that they may not even be aware of. So they're in this state of suffering and like perpetual loneliness that they can't even feel. It's
Mm.
a hard scene inside a deeply avoidant person. All
Mm.
that perfectionism, all that worldly performance, it's masking something that's quite lonely
Mm.
and quite painful. But they do want love. A person with avoidant attachment may not have the capacity for that at the same rate that other people do. It's not that they don't want love, period. It's not that. It's that they aren't able to take it in at the same rate as other people. Like they have a little tiny mouth or a little tiny stomach, and they're only able to take in so much love at once. And they really want it, but they had the gastric bypass surgery as a kid, and their stomach is only so big, and they can only take in so much at once. And you just have to be mindful of that, that they're there.
Mm.
They may have all this beauty and complexity that's so alluring to an anxiously attached partner on the other side,
Mm.
And it's cause for compassion and pause.
Mhm.
Like, there's a person in there. There's somebody who wants love. And there are reasons that they're behaving like this or having these reactions. That said,
Mm.
it's pretty hard to get those people into therapy because
Mm.
avoidance. It seems that they need to be in a state of a lot of pain to move in that direction of therapy, growth work. And you just won't catch a person with avoidant attachment reading a self-help book unless unless the building is on fire. Like unless life is absolutely on fire, it's hard to get them to come around to growth work. Just
Mm.
naturally. Yeah, that's a misconception about people with avoidant attachment for sure.
Yeah. And I love how you mentioned so much around the compassion for people with avoidant. And I think it really matches in with what you said there around how people with anxious attachment style tend to lean in and try and do the work for them because it seems like the avoidant person won't do it themselves. Now, I just want to pause on that because I think what can be really common, and I want to say common, but not a rule, is there tends to be a larger portion of men with avoidant attachment style and women with anxious attachment style. It seems to be more common that way, although I have quite a few clients who are women who have avoidant attachment style as well. Just I'd love to get a little bit of insight from you around your observations around that, because what can be really common, of course, is yes, a lot of women have anxious attachment style, but it also comes with the frustration, the pain, and the wound that says, okay, if I start to do this work, it's going to be hopeless because he's never going to join in, or inevitably I'm going to end up on my own. But I think it's a beautiful segue to continue touching on that reference there around we need to not undermine their agency to grow either. So the anxious attachment style can often try and protect or project or create rules around, well, this is the capacity that my partner has. This is the only way that they know. And so they put in place a lot of contingency plans or coping mechanisms because they don't believe that their partner has the capacity. So I'd love to get your perspective as a man and as someone who coaches women as well. What's your perception and what are you seeing in terms of patterning around why men tend to sway more towards the avoidant attachment style? And what would you suggest women who are feeling stuck, who are in that moment of time around, well, this is just the way things are. This is the way my partner is. It's not going to change. I'm either going to need to abandon myself and just try and make the relationship work, or try and do the work and possibly risk ending up on my own. But there's the level of resentment there that comes in around, gosh, like, why do I have to be the one to do this? Why do I have to be the one to do all the work?
Sure. I mean, don't do it. Don't do it. You're doing everyone a disservice by doing it. Don't do it.
Mm.
Just don't do the emotional labor. You're doing your partner a disservice. You're doing you a disservice because you're rushing in to do the dishes, to continue that analogy. And your partner's not going to learn to do his own dishes unless you quit doing them. So honoring self before the connection makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, that person with anxious attachment may end up maintaining that connection with zero integrity in the connection. That actually, there's so much lopsided effort from either direction. It's not working out. Everybody, like, they may be people pleasing and absolutely not themselves. They may be completely forsaking themselves in service of this connection that is, in fact, forsaken by their forsaking of themselves. So it's
Mm.
everybody's wearing masks. Like, it doesn't work. So
Mm.
beyond honoring a connection and trying to make a relationship last, I tell clients to honor themselves, like be the fullest version of yourself and let the chips fall where they may. You can't control this other person. And if that's the state of affairs, that your partner is such a disappointment in so many ways, you just have to sit with that disappointment because it's very
Mm.
unlikely that we're going to change our partner. We can make a request, see what happens, and then leave. So at some point, it's really difficult to wait and to hold on to hope and overperform in all these ways. And we don't have control over who our partner is or how they're behaving. We can make requests, but we can't do anything to really control that. Yeah, that's what I'd advise that person in that situation to do. Not that I'm big into advice in my coaching practice. I'm mostly sitting with people and in their experience and very, in one way, passive maternal support. But you also asked about men. And it's true that men are more avoidant. Research shows, stats are there. I've cited it before in something I've written. I can't remember where it was, but you can find the peer reviewed journal where the studies show men are on average a little bit more skewed towards avoidance. And the reason for that, in my mind, is that we're socialized in that way. Men are supposed to be stoic. We hold it all together. We don't cry, don't do this, don't do that. All of our emotions are off limits, save for anger, pride, maybe.
Mm.
So, because of that, we are in a state of avoidance of our emotions. We haven't been allowed that culturally. On the flip side, women are taught to be pleasing to people. They're taught that their identity is contingent on other people's opinion of them. So that's its own nightmare that lends itself to being more anxious. If you're having
Mm.
to control other people's opinion of you and be what they want you to be all the time, that creates an anxious attachment style. So those are the
Mm.
reasons that I see those things developing along the gender lines, as you mentioned. And I do men's work too. I have two men's groups that I run, and I see it in guys all the time that if you ask a man what he feels, the next words out of his mouth are often, I think. I
Mm.
think, but we're just not there. We're trained so far away from that mode of existence that it takes guys a long time to get there. And it's not going to happen if somebody's swooping in to do the dishes and caretake
Yeah.
and
Mm.
manage the emotions. He just needs to flounder. Your partner needs to be in pain. And I assume that the listeners out there are mostly folks with anxious attachment who are doing the work, who are listening to podcasts, doing the self
Mhm.
help. So, yes, please let your partner experience failure, their pain, maintain those good boundaries, tolerate their bratty reaction that might occur if you're not performing in this way to soothe them. That's the solution, is to let them have their experience, let them have their self responsibility and maybe fall flat on their face.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that a lot. Just the simplicity around that of it's okay to let them fall, you know?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that
You're okay. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that wound comes from a place for so many people with anxious attachment style is I was left to fall. I had to do it on my
Mm.
own, and it's
Ooh.
terrifying. I can't let other people there's almost a sense of self-soothing that comes from, I mustn't
Mm.
let them fall because nobody helped me. Nobody was there for me. I can't let them fall because it's like watching myself fall, and I
Mm.
can't do that. And
Yeah.
so there's something very powerful and important about acknowledging how terrifying that can be for people with anxious attachment style. If I let them
Mhm.
fall, not only am I letting a version of myself fall, but they will leave. They will
Mm.
leave. I can't let them leave. If I allow them to sit in discomfort, then I am choosing to be alone. I'm abandoning my own self. I'm doing it to myself. I'm doing what was done to me. And I think that there's something so important and valuable and precious and sacred about speaking directly to people with anxious attachment style with such love and saying it's okay to let them fall. Hold yourself, and it's not abandoning the other person, it's not abandoning yourself to explore what allowing your partner to sit in discomfort can look like because you believe in them, because you're no longer undermining their agency to grow.
Don't be your partner's drug. Don't be your partner's addiction.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you make that comparison, would you allow your partner to, is it a loving thing to allow people to continue their addictive behaviors?
No, they need to detox, and it's painful and it's terrible. And it's difficult for the
Mm.
person with anxious attachment who's more proactive in the relationship to watch that happen. And I love that
Mhm.
you add that the anxious experience is echoing their past and someone let them fall. They knew what it was
Mm.
like to feel so helpless, alone, and when they see that in their partner, of course, they want to help. There's, oh my goodness, this is so core to me. I want to help this person who's struggling. And the critical thing there is that the partner has the resources as an adult. They're an adult, not a neglected child. They have the resources or should have the resources to pull it together somehow, to figure it out eventually on their time frame.
Yeah. I would love to hear from you. How would you help someone who is maybe new to attachment styles or new to exploring what that means in their world, or maybe just starting to get good at integrating and experiencing the differentiation between who they actually are and their identity outside of their attachment style patterns? How would you help someone distinguish between their attachment triggers and their intuition in dating or relationships? How would you support them with that?
I discourage them from spending time thinking about that. For starters, I wouldn't encourage them to honor their label or be too distrusting of themselves based on their past conditioning. So it's going to be impossible to sort out what's my anxious attachment style, or is he just absent? Is it like 4 days the right amount to text, or there's all this questioning and a lot of anxiety that goes into that. We're trying to figure out what is the external circumstance, what's appropriate externally. I'd really direct them back into themselves, into the moment, and figure out what they want in terms of what is their body calling for, what feels like too much to sit with, what feels like self betrayal. And they may not be aware of that right away, but to know what's there, to know what they really want and need is a great place to start in figuring out, hey, is this other person providing it for me? And if they're not,
Mm.
you can make a request around that. And if the response to that is unacceptable, you can try to renegotiate or leave. So it's again honoring reality in terms of the external world and honoring self too. But what anxiously attached people often do is get in their partner's head. They're trying to figure out what this means to, what does this behavior mean that he's doing this? How does this reflect on me? So that's a no-win game. And to come back to truth, to come back to home, to come back to our belly, like where are we right now? What is the essence of this being? What is it like to be in this moment? From there, we can understand what we need, and our needs vary from person to person. And they're an ultimatum: I need my needs met or I leave. And what we want, which is more negotiable. And maybe we get some of the things we want, but not all. We're going to have to compromise and be adults. But to come away from labels is what I recommend all my clients do. There's so much fascination with that in pop culture, online. You'll find it up and down of people who qualify as having anxious attachment, very focused on understanding the issue, learning more, podcasts, books, Instagram. I had one piece of content on Instagram go wildly viral that was based on understanding the experience of the avoidantly attached partner. Wow, that hit the roof. Yeah, I just discourage labels and coming to truth as it is right now and looking at, is this partner satisfying me? Is this what I want?
Mm.
We don't do
Yeah.
that. We're like, should this be happening? Is this okay? Is he avoidant? Is this a red flag or a green flag? Or am I doing something wrong? Is this how things should be? As though there's some parent or authority in the room. And there's not.
Mm,
It's just us. And we have to know what's right for us, state it, and act accordingly.
I love that. That's really powerful. I'd love to ask you a question. On this podcast, what we like to do is take a question from the previous guest and leave it like as a gift or a bridge for the next podcast guest, because sometimes the insights that we have, conversations that we didn't even know that we could have, can be really fascinating and allow us to consider things in a new way. But I think this question is going to be really powerful for your level of expertise and the clients that you work with. And the question that was left from a previous guest was, what are some practical tools that you use for nervous system grounding in the moment to come home to yourself?
I said breathe in my head. Before you even finished the rest of that question, you're like practical tools. I was just like, breathe, breathe. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Is come home to yourself is whatever's happening right here. It's one of the first things that I do with clients is lay out the ways that they're self-resourcing when things are tough. Make yourself a basket or an altar of this place where you have the things that help you soothe yourself. That could be a playlist of music, weighted blanket, essential oils. Like know the ways that you regulate yourself down when you're in a high energy state of like anxiety or anger, and some of the ways where you regulate yourself up out of sadness, depression.
I love
So
that.
that is the foundation of moving forward with healing or growth or connection, is to have that baseline regulation, because without that, we're just in fight, flight, flee, fawn. We're activated. We're in a state of panic. And there's no growth that's going to come from that. There's no healthy connection. It's very normal. It's really normal and okay to be experiencing those things. They were
Mm,
adaptive patterns at one time. So don't fault yourself for them, but also
mm,
know how to address that and how to care for yourself when they come up. So
yeah.
breathe, breathe. Yeah. And DBT is great for that. Dialectical behavioral therapy. It has a lot of tools for down regulating. Next level, get a bowl of ice water and stick your face in it.
Mm,
That sounds crazy, but your body thinks it's underwater. And there's a big physiological change that comes from holding your breath, needing to pull resources together in that time. So there's
mm.
a physiological change. Worst case scenario, yeah, fill a bowl with ice water and stick your face in there.
I love that. Adding it to the list. And the last question I'd like to check in with you is, what is a question that you would leave for our next podcast guest that you would feel that would allow them to really speak into something that you believe the audience could really resonate with? What would that question be from you?
Okay, what kind of strange, interesting question can I leave for this next poor, unsuspecting guest? Where do you find joy in your connections in unexpected or forbidden ways?
I love that question. And so, Jack, what I would like to ask you is, where do you find joy in your connections in unexpected or forbidden ways?
Okay, we'll go with forbidden. And I think it's so normal for humans to relish someone else's jealousy just a little bit. I think we all do it. We fault ourselves for it. But I have, and I'm speaking for myself, that like, ooh, I've got it. I'm more fortunate than someone else. So in this little glimmering moment, I think that there's like a competitive one-upmanship that comes out, that I'm like, oh, I'm relishing someone else's jealousy. If we do
Mm,
that, don't kid ourselves. That's there. So, yeah, I'm learning to embrace more and more of myself always. And that's a
mm,
shadowy thing to acknowledge about myself. There's something petty
mm,
there. And I accept it. I include it in me. I feel confidence in my kind heart. I'm a complete human. I'm here, but I think there's some ways that we're punctuating our ego. We're really enjoying ourselves when we see someone else being jealous of us.
And I think it's such a healthy to call out the shadow side, but, also in terms of humanity and embracing all parts of ourselves, there's a beautiful reflection there around pausing and allowing yourself to experience gratitude and celebration when it's reflected back to you. In
Yeah.
what a lovely moment in time, we could interpret that as jealousy from someone else. We could interpret that as, "Oh, no, I
Yeah.
can't believe someone else would be so petty." We can judge our own selves for feeling, "Oh, okay, well, now I feel good. This is competitive aspect." But
Yeah.
what if there's the whole nuance? But what if it's all part of the party and we can actually say, "Oh my goodness," by embracing the full spectrum of the human experience, how cool is this that I get a reflection around maybe pausing and acknowledging and celebrating and honoring something that maybe I didn't a second ago that gives me an opportunity to pause on that. And I also want to kind of finish on a note, something I heard recently that I really loved around jealousy integrated is simply an opportunity to honor the possibility of something that exists in us that hasn't been catalyzed yet. And the word yet is really important as well. If you feel jealousy for someone else, it's because you believe that you have the potential too. So I really love moments where I feel a sense of jealousy for someone else too. And then just go, pause,
Mhm.
huh, do I embrace that jealousy and simply explore the possibility that lives
Yeah.
to me if I allow myself to regulate and celebrate that other person and bring my energy up to match that? Or do I take it at face value, which is either judge myself for being jealous or criticize the other person and maybe find sneaky ways to criticize or bring the
Mhm.
other person down because there's envy or jealousy there. So I love all of that. I love all of those angles, and particularly what you mentioned there around the full spectrum of who we are and the love for all of our parts. So I really want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jack. And I would love to also hear from you where our listeners can find you to continue the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I just encourage listeners and everyone to accept all of themselves, all of it, and not judge. Stop judging yourself, please. And you can find more about me at jackbohannan.com. That's hard to spell, so I'm assuming it's down in the show notes. And if you go to jackbohannan.com/heal, you can get a great webinar about how anxiously attached partners can get back more control and power in their relationship. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, Jack. And I also encourage any of our listeners to continue the conversation. Drop some comments in the show notes. We'll be continuing a lot of this. I think this is going to resonate for so many people. If you have anything in particular come up, something that you want to share, something you want to go deeper on, please come and join us on Instagram. Both of our socials are linked in the show notes. If you have some questions, something you want us to cover on the podcast as well, please feel free to comment or come and hang out with us on Instagram. Make sure to follow and subscribe the Connection Podcast and continue your connection journey along with us here at the Connection Podcast. Thank you for being here.